It's the 90s and you're sitting right there on the family room carpet. That bulky VCR is sitting by the TV just waiting for you to make a choice. You reach for the tape with the worn cardboard sleeve. It's a Disney Sing-Along Songs, and you already know every single word by heart. You push that plastic brick into the slot and hear that satisfying VCR clunk. The TV screen flickers from static to bright color, and then it finally starts. You see the bouncing Mickey head. The lyrics light up on screen. You're dancing with the characters, singing every word. But the second those credits roll at the end, your hand is already slapping that rewind button. The tape whirs as it spins back to the beginning. Then you do it all over again. That was the ritual, and it was the loop that defined a generation. Hey, this is Synergy Loves Company, where we explore how Disney connects to everything. I'm Eric, and today we're taking a look at one of the most powerful Disney feedback loops of a 90s childhood. The Disney Sing-Along Songs VHS tapes. But here's the secret you might not know. This was not some original timeless Disney masterstroke. It was actually a clever but low-budget solution built entirely out of spare parts. All right, let's rewind the clock back to the early 1980s to understand why sing-along songs even had to exist in the first place. You have to understand the massive problem Disney had with home video. And it was a self-imposed problem. Throughout the early 80s, the crown jewels of Disney animation like Snow White, Cinderella, and Fantasia were simply not for sale. You could not own them because Disney kept them locked away in that famous Disney vault. Their business model was to release them for limited theatrical runs every 7 or so years, which kept the demand high, but these tapes out of your house. So if you were a kid in 1984, you couldn't just go out and buy a copy of Snow White. You might know the characters from books or maybe even an old Viewmaster reel, but you couldn't see the movies until Disney took them out of the vault and brought them into theaters. Disney realized they were sitting on a gigantic, decades-deep archive of animation that featured thousands of scenes of characters singing and dancing their hearts out. In the early 80s, the launch of a brand new cable channel gave them a wild idea for what to do with all that footage. 1983 was the year that the Disney Channel officially launched, and a year later, one of their biggest moves was a series called DTV. This was the company's direct answer to the MTV craze. Remember, MTV in the early 80s was not just another channel. It was a cultural explosion that made music visual and turned every artist into a video star. The concept for DTV was genius because of its simplicity. They took classic Disney animation and edited it to fit pop hits from Hall & Oates, the Beach Boys, and even Michael Jackson. They proved something massive with this experiment, which was that the archival animation in the Disney library was essentially a giant music video goldmine. They had all the clips they could ever need, and they just had to match them up with the right top 40 soundtrack. DTV became a huge hit on the Disney Channel, and it showed the executives that there was a real hunger to see these classic scenes in a new music-driven context. But DTV was made specifically for cable and was just sprinkled into the programming block throughout the day. The thing that sparked the idea for a product you could actually buy and take home did not come from inside the company. All right, let's jump ahead to early 1986, when a home video called Kidsongs, A Day at Old MacDonald's Farm, hit the market and totally exploded. We're talking about a phenomenon that sold millions of copies, which was was a massive number for the time. The creators were Carol Rosenstein and a director named Bruce Gowers. But here's the crazy part about Bruce. He wasn't some veteran of children's television because his real claim to fame was directing music videos, early music videos. He worked with Prince, Rod Stewart, so many others, including that iconic Bohemian Rhapsody video for Queen. It's wild to think that the guy who pioneered the music video visual style of the early 80s eventually turned his attention to toddlers. He brought that high-gloss, multi-camera music video production value to the world of the sing-along. But Kidsongs wasn't just a collection of random clips. They had a theme. They called it a music video story. The video had a simple story about kids spending a day on the farm, and it featured them singing well-known songs like Old MacDonald. It was built from the ground up to get kids at home to join in with the video. Over at Disney's home video division, the executives had to have seen this runaway success and realized that all these different cultural moments were starting to coalesce. Disney could continue to unlock the pieces of that untouchable animation vault and apply the same participatory, lyric-driven format to create a low-cost product to sell Disney music directly to families in a visual style. So with that formula finally in place, they still needed a specific project or reason to actually make the first one. And in late 1986, Disney found their excuse because they needed a promotional tool for the 40th anniversary theatrical re-release of Song of the South. Now, we aren't going to get into the weeds on that film today because you already know the deal and how complicated that history is, and this is not that show. Maybe another time. But for Disney in 1986, this was still a property that they were trying to promote, and it happened to have an undeniably catchy Oscar-winning song called Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah. That song became a solution for the whole project, and they decided to build an entire sing-along tape around it. To make the video flow from one song to the next, though, they needed a host, and this was being done on the cheap, so they went digging through the archives instead and struck gold with two educational musical shorts from 1953 called Melody and Toot Whistle Plunkin' Boom. These were really cool, stylized cartoons where a character named Professor Owl taught a class of little birds about music, and he was the perfect musical authority figure for the job. They re-recorded the audio and brought Corey Burton in to voice the owl, which gave those old, mostly forgotten characters a second life, introducing a whole new generation to the sing-along songs. Then there was the simple technology of the bouncing ball, which definitely was not a new idea, even back then. That technique had been around since the 1920s, when Disney's competitor Fleischer Studios added it to cartoon shorts so the theater audience could sing along in unison to silent films. But for a kid sitting at home in the 80s and 90s, that little Mickey Mouse head bouncing from word to word felt like magic and made you feel like a performer right in your living room. They stitched everything together using archival clips from Song of the South, that old Professor Owl footage, the bouncing ball, and clips from a handful of other Disney classics. They even brought in a new composer named Patrick DeRemer to write the series' theme song, years before he'd become even more famous for writing Powerline's iconic Goofy movie songs. Just in time for the theatrical re-release of Song of the South, they released Disney Sing-Along Songs Zip-A-Dee-Doo-Dah. And while it technically was Volume 1, they didn't even call it yet. They didn't know it was going to be a sensation. But then once that first tape hit the shelves, Disney realized they had stumbled onto the perfect blueprint. These things were incredibly cheap to produce because the studio just had to reuse existing animation clips and pull out old host footage out of the archives. If they were feeling fancy, they might record one new song, but Otherwise, the profit margins were absolutely massive. Beyond the money, these tapes served as the ultimate promotional tool for the rest of the company. If you look at early volumes, the timing is always too perfect to be a coincidence. Sing-Along Songs Heigh-Ho arrived in 1987 specifically to hype up the 50th anniversary theatrical re-release of Snow White. The Bare Necessities celebrated 20 years of The Jungle Book. When You Can Fly showed up for the 35th anniversary of Peter Pan, it proved that the pattern was set. Every time a classic movie left the Disney vault for a limited run in theaters, a brand new Sing-Along Songs tape was waiting for you at the video store. For families back then, buying one of these felt like a total magic trick. You have to remember that the big animated classics were still locked away and you couldn't just go and buy a copy of Snow White whenever you wanted, but you could grab the Heigh-Ho tape and get the best parts of Snow White and Pinocchio and Mary Poppins all in the same place. It was basically a curated preview or a Disney's Greatest Hits album in video form. And this kind of solved the limited library problem that every 90s kid dealt with on their family room shelf. Sure, you had that one friend who had all the tapes, but you might only own 10 VHS tapes in your entire collection. But if one of those was a Sing-Along Songs volume, you suddenly had access to pieces of a dozen different classic films. It made a small collection feel huge, and it gave you a way to connect with all those legendary Disney stories even when the full movies weren't available to you. Over at Disney Home Video, these tapes became evergreen titles. They weren't like the blockbuster movie releases that would come and go with a huge marketing push and then disappear. These were reliable, repeatable purchases that stayed on the shelves year after year. They were a permanent anchor of the kids section at the local rental store, sitting right there next to the Barney tapes and the Thomas the Tank Engine compilations. Even the VHS box itself felt like a piece of the magic with those glossy, colorful covers and the big Disney character smiling at you on the front. It was a promise that you'd get a piece of the Disney vault and a chance to join in on the fun yourself. This Sing-Along Songs promotional machine really found its true purpose in the 90s when Disney animation completely exploded. This was the era of the Disney Renaissance, giving us Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King. Suddenly, there was a constant stream of new iconic songs that every kid knew by heart. And the Sing-Along series was right there to package them up. Volumes like Under the Sea, Be Our Guest, and Circle of Life weren't just a collection of songs, they were the ultimate hype machine. For lots of us, the Sing-Along Songs tape was actually our first taste of a new movie before we even saw it. It was a genius bit of marketing that felt more like a gift than an advertisement. But it was a promotional advertisement. Then you had the Disney Parks tapes, which are a whole different category of pure, concentrated nostalgia and hold a special place in the heart of those Disney Parks fans. There was Disneyland Fun, and later Let's Go to Disneyland Paris were legendary because for kids who hadn't been to the parks yet, that tape was the vacation. You'd sit in your living room and watch these families ride Splash Mountain or meet Mickey while you sang along to Grim Grinning Ghosts. And if you were one of the kids who was lucky enough to have visited the parks, it became the ultimate home movie and a souvenir that lets you relive your trip whenever you wanted. You'd point at the screen and tell anyone who would listen that you were right there and you went on that ride. And this is where that rewind and repeat ritual was perfected. You have to remember that watching these tapes wasn't a passive experience at all. It was a full-blown performance. You'd stand in the front of the TV and sing and do all the little dance moves that went with the music. And the second those credits started to roll, you'd sprint to the VCR to hit rewind so you could do the whole thing all over again. The psychology behind it is simple but incredibly powerful. The bouncing ball, those catchy melodies created a loop of mastery and joy for every kid watching. You might fumble through the words the first time you saw the tape, but by the third replay, you were an absolute expert and felt like you were part of the show. And that's why the memory of these tapes stays so strong, because it isn't just something you saw. It's a physical memory of singing and dancing and hitting that rewind button until your living room felt like a stage. You were the star and that tape was your backing band. The series didn't just sit still, and eventually it started branching out into some pretty interesting territory. We got the live-action Mickey's Fun Songs spin-off tapes where real kids went to the circus or the beach, which definitely felt like Disney was trying to compete in that Kidsongs lane. They even did a character-specific spin-off with Winnie the Pooh to keep the momentum going. And by the time the early 2000s rolled around, the original hosts stepped aside, and we saw Sebastian the Crab from The Little Mermaid take over for Professor Owl to conduct the music. It was the start of a brand new era, but the real legacy of Disney Sing-Along Songs isn't actually the tapes themselves. The real impact is the format Disney perfected, because they basically created this modern standard for Disney at-home karaoke. If you ever wondered where the idea for those Frozen or Encanto sing-along editions in movie theaters came from, or why tons of movies on Disney Plus have a sing-along version, you're looking at the direct descendant of these VHS tapes. The principle is exactly the same as it was in the 80s, where you take a great Disney song, put the words on screen, and turn the audience into a participant instead of just a passive viewer. And the format actually escaped the living room and moved right into the theme parks to become a live experience. Shows like the Festival of the Lion King have always featured a Hakuna Matata sing-along section. But the best example is, for the first time in forever, a Frozen sing-along celebration at Hollywood Studios. This isn't just a standard stage show, it's a massive theater where lyrics flash on giant screens while hundreds of people belt out "Let It Go" together. When you're sitting in those seats, you're essentially inside a live-action volume of sing-along songs. It's a wild trajectory when you think about it, how a cheap promotional tape for Song of the South turned into a cultural touchstone for thousands, millions of 90s kids who grew up to be the Disney adults of today. So the next time you're on Disney Plus and the lyrics pop up during We Don't Talk About Bruno, just remember that you aren't just watching a movie, you're participating in a Disney music legacy. The song never really ends, and if you're feeling nostalgic, you can even rewind this video and watch it all over again. Thanks for joining me for this look into music videos, promotional strategy, and of course, those Disney Sing-Along Songs tapes that lived in your VCR. Remember, Disney magic isn't just in the parks, it's all around us. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Synergy Loves Company so you don't miss any Disney connections like this one. And if you're feeling nostalgic for shopping for old Disney VHS tapes, watch this next. And remember, until next time, keep discovering the magic in everything.